Imagine, if you will, being 10 years old again.
Oh, to be 10 again.
Right. But picture this. You are out in the freezing, biting cold of a January afternoon. It's the year 1204.
So, no central heating to run back to.
Exactly. You're bundled up against the wind, completely immersed in a ruthless, muddy war game with your older brothers. And, you're losing.
Obviously. Older brothers always claim the best imaginary weapon.
They really do. They've got the high ground, the best sticks, everything. So you decide to resort to the nuclear option.
Oh, I love the nuclear option. What do you do?
Well, you march right over to the Houndkeeper's shed and you grab a handful of absolutely rancid, foul-smelling goose grease.
Oh, wow. Goose grease.
Yeah, the kind they use to treat injured hunting dogs. It's mixed with old lard and these incredibly pungent herbs. It is squidgy, it's freezing, and it just stinks to high heaven.
That's incredibly gross.
It's so gross, and you just launch it, direct hit. Right. So you're standing there in the winter mud, victorious but smelling like a walking disaster. You've totally ruined your brother's cloak.
And you just know the trouble's coming.
Oh, you know it. Suddenly, a servant appears. You are called inside by your parents.
Time to face the music.
Exactly. You trudge into the manor house, wiping your greasy hands on a hay net, fully expecting to be locked in your room, or just severely punished.
Which honestly would be fair for the goose grease incident.
Right. But instead of a scolding, your parents sit you down in their warm, candlelit solar, and they tell you that you are getting married.
That is just, wow, what a pivot.
It's wild, right? And not just someday in the abstract future. The negotiations are completely done.
Just like that.
Just like that. You are being wed to a grown man to secure a massive geopolitical alliance. They are effectively turning your 10-year-old life into a human shield for your family's estates.
It really is the ultimate jarring pivot. From the absolute innocence of childhood play straight into the brutal, unforgiving realities of feudal politics.
It gives you whiplash just thinking about it.
It really does. I mean, one minute you're throwing mud and grease in the yard, fighting just for the right to participate in a mock battle, and the very next minute you are the most crucial piece on a national chessboard.
And that exact whiplash-inducing transition is what we are plunging into today. So welcome to the deep dive.
I'm so excited to get into this one.
Me too. We are looking at this incredible stack of sources today, mostly centered around excerpts from Elizabeth Chadwick's intricately researched historical novel, To Defy a King.
The level of detail in these sources is it's staggering.
It really is. We've got complex family trees detailing the absolute highest nobility of the Angevin realm. We have geographical maps that span from, the icy, sleet-battered fields of Yorkshire all the way down across the English Channel to the orchards of Normandy.
And that chapter list, it honestly reads like a ticking clock.
Yes. It's like counting down to an inevitable catastrophic war. And just to be clear for everyone listening, we are treating the narrative, the character dynamics, and the historical backdrop presented in these pages as the factual basis for our exploration today.
Right. We're taking the text as our absolute reality for this deep dive.
Exactly. We are dropping right into the political deep end. It's 1204, King John is on the throne, the Angevin Empire is violently fracturing, and the magnates, the guys who hold the real military and economic power, are in an absolute panic.
Because everything they built is suddenly on the line.
Right. They're frantically trying to secure their futures, their lands, and honestly, their heads. And they're doing it using the most valuable, tangible currency they possess.
Their own children.
Okay, let's unpack this. Because that brings us directly to the Marshal Manor of Caversham in Berkshire.
And right back to that 10-year-old girl covered in the goose grease.
Yes, her name is Mahelt Marshal. She's the eldest daughter of the legendary William Marshal, Earl of Pembroke.
And Mahelt is just a truly fascinating entry point into this world. When we first meet her, she's already chafing against the rigid boundaries of her society.
She really is. I mean, she's out in the yard with her older brothers, Will and Richard, who are playing at nights.
Right, and Will is almost 14. He's the heir to the earldom, and he's riding this glossy new warhorse.
A warhorse that he's rather pretentiously named Equus, by the way.
So pretentious for a teenager.
Totally. Now, Mahelt desperately wants to ride. The text tells us she knows she's as good a rider as either of them, but her own dumpy little chestnut pony is laid up with a leg strain.
Which is just classic bad luck when you want to prove yourself.
Exactly. So she asks to join the raid on foot, and Will just shuts her down with absolute feudal authority. He tells her, flat out, girls don't go raiding.
He gives her the classic, infuriatingly condescending older brother's speech.
Ugh, the worst kind of speech.
He essentially tells her that her only destiny is to stay at home, embroider, and bear children.
But Mahelt, bless her, pushes right back. She points out the glaring hypocrisy in his logic.
She's so sharp for a 10-year-old.
She really is. She reminds him that noblewomen routinely have to defend the castle when their lords are away. I mean, their own mother, Countess Isabel, does exactly that.
But Will just uses his physical size and status to force her into the role of the defending French, right? He literally relegates her to the kennel keeper's hut.
Yep. And that is exactly where she finds the heavy artillery.
The hound keeper self.
Yes. The sources provide this incredibly visceral detail about it. It's a chubby earthenware pot with a plated straw lid.
And it's full of lard from the autumn pig killing mixed with medicinal herbs. Just
So gross. But Mahelt doesn't just accept her marginalization. She steps out, faces the makeshift lances of her charging brothers, and just pelts them with handfuls of this rancid grease.
She hits Richard square in the face. It's brilliant.
It is, but the victory is entirely fleeting, isn't it?
Yeah, unfortunately. Will just pulls rank. He uses his superior physical strength, grabs her, gives her a disgusted shove, and tells her, "I pity whoever gets you to wife. You're a hoyden."
Okay, for those of you listening who aren't totally brushed up on your medieval insults, a hoyden is essentially a boisterous, loud, unruly tomboy.
Right. It's a heavily loaded term. He's trying to remind her that she is failing at her primary societal function, being a docile, marketable, aristocratic female.
So unfair. She's left standing there, freezing cold, her fingers smelling unbearably of this vile salve.
And she knows she's going to be in huge trouble for wasting the kennel keeper's supplies.
Exactly. And right on cue, Godfrey, the under-chamberlain, appears to summon her.
And that walk from the freezing, muddy courtyard to her parents' private chamber, the solar, it really acts as a physical representation of her transition from childhood to adulthood.
Oh, for sure. She stops at the trough to sluice her hands, desperately wiping them on a hay net to hide her guilt.
But when she enters the room, the atmosphere is entirely disarming. It's not a disciplinary hearing at all.
Not even slightly. The room is warm, glowing with expensive beeswax candles. Her mother, Isabel, who smells of roses, just pulls her into a tender cuddle.
And her younger brothers are just playing a dice game on the floor. It is this picture of absolute insulated domestic security.
But right in the middle of this domestic warmth, her father, William Marshal, is acting completely out of character.
Yeah, it's very noticeable.
I mean, he's this massive, legendary warrior, the man who literally wrote the book on tournament combat and chivalry. And he's sitting there holding Mahelt's floppy cloth doll in his massive hands, just looking at it pensively.
It's such a striking image.
It really is. He sets the doll down and asks her if she remembers the Christmas court at Canterbury.
And she does. She remembers the feasts, the dancing, the blinding rubies and sapphires King John wore.
And then her father asks, "You remember Hugh Bigod?"
Oh, Mahelt remembers Hugh vividly. He's the son of the Earl of Norfolk.
Right, and he's a grown man. He's 21 years old.
Yeah, but he danced with her at Christmas, he led a circle dance, and he kindly organized games of hoodman blind for the younger children.
She remembers his rich singing voice and a smile that made her 10-year-old stomach flutter, just a little crush.
Exactly, a
Yeah.
totally innocent childhood crush. But then, William Marshal just drops the anvil.
He tells her flatly, "Your mother and I believe it would be good for Marshal and Bigod to unite in a marriage alliance."
Boom. Childhood over.
See, I read the scene and I find myself really struggling with the concept of parental love in this era. We are looking at a 10-year-old girl clutching a cloth doll.
It's harsh.
To use a structural analogy, it feels like William Marshal is treating his daughter the same way a castellan treats a load-bearing timber.
Oh, that's a great way to put it.
Right. She is literally a piece of material being wedged into place to keep the roof from caving in on the rest of the family. He tells her that Roger Bigod is powerful, his estates are prosperous, and he knows the laws of the land.
It's essentially a geopolitical resume.
Exactly. Is it fair to view these children merely as political capital, or is there a protective, genuine parental affection driving this ruthless calculation?
Well, it is profoundly both, and that is the central, agonizing tension of the feudal family unit. William Marshal explicitly lays out his reasoning to his 10-year-old daughter, exactly as if he were speaking to an adult war council.
Which is pretty intense for a kid.
Very. But notice the core of his argument to Mahelt. He says, you will be safe and cared for, and that matters to me.
Ah, right, the safety aspect.
Yes, and you really have to look at the geographical maps provided in our sources to understand the gravity of this. The Marshall Lands are heavily concentrated on the volatile, bloody borders of Wales, plus those crumbling territories in France.
The danger zones, basically.
Exactly. The Bigod lands, conversely, are in Norfolk and Yorkshire,
Hmm?
the extreme east and north of England. By marrying her to Hugh, William Marshal is geographically removing his daughter from the immediate blast radius of the coming wars.
That makes a lot of sense. He also explicitly tells her that this is a fleeting opportunity. If they don't lock this alliance down right now, the Earl of Norfolk is going to find another highly advantageous match for Hugh.
It's a limited time offer on a crucial alliance.
And Mahelt actually processes this with a maturity that honestly breaks your heart a little bit. She thinks about her cousin Ela, who was married to the Earl of Salisbury at age 9.
9 years old. It's just hard to fathom.
It is. She thinks about her own older brother, Will, who is already betrothed to a 5-year-old.
Right, so this is simply the reality of her cast. She accepts it. She just says, I like Hugh Bigod.
And we get a crucial, intimate look into the true parental sentiment later that night. The text provides this private bedside conversation between William and Isabel.
They are watching Mahelt sleep, noting that she is still fiercely clutching that little cloth doll.
Yeah. And William is deeply conflicted. He's suffering a real crisis of conscience. He carried her to her christening 10 years ago, and now he is signing her childhood away.
He has this great quote. He says, time is like riding a horse at full gallop that will not answer to your rein.
Okay, that quote about the horse at full gallop is striking, but I mean, isn't it also a bit of a cop-out for William Marshal?
What do you mean?
Well, he's the one holding the reins. He's the one who initiated this negotiation with the Bigods. He's mourning the loss of her childhood while actively orchestrating its end.
That is exactly the paradox of his position. And his wife, Isabel, actually calls him on it with absolute clear-eyed pragmatism.
She doesn't let him wallow.
Not at all. She replies, the horse might not answer to your rein, but at least by planning ahead, you are less likely to lose your seat in the saddle.
Wow. Isabel understands the terrifying, overarching reality of their political situation perfectly.
She does. Because the text reveals that King John does not trust William Marshal, and the feeling is intensely mutual.
John is not a guy you want doubting your loyalty.
No. King John is a deeply paranoid monarch. He uses hostages, extortion, and sudden ruin to control his magnates.
So by tethering Mahelt to the powerful Bigod family, the Marshals are building a coalition that even King John would hesitate to attack.
Exactly. They love her desperately. But in 1204, loving your noble daughter meant leveraging her body and her future to secure her physical and economic survival.
The terrifying mechanics of feudal survival. And we really have to remember, this betrothal isn't just a Marshal decision.
Right, it takes two to make an alliance.
There's a whole other family making exactly the same cold calculations from the other side of the chessboard. So the sources shift our geographical focus dramatically here. We move away from the cozy, candlelit solar in Berkshire, and we go over 200 miles north to Setrington in Yorkshire.
It's February now. The weather is brutal, and we are introduced to the other half of this equation.
Yes, we meet Hugh Bigod in the dead of winter, and the setting is intensely primal. The landscape is being battered by icy rain and sleet blowing in from the North Sea.
And Hugh is out in the tawny winter grass, wiping wolf blood off his hunting spear.
The text is incredibly graphic in this opening scene. He has just killed a female wolf. She had a swollen belly, but the text makes a point to note it wasn't from pups.
Right, it was from gorging on a pregnant ewe that she and her mate had brought down in the sheepfolds the day before.
It's a striking, deliberate image by the author.
It absolutely is, and it serves as a really powerful metaphor for the political climate. The wolves slink around the edges of the estates in the gray twilight, preying on the weak and the vulnerable during the most desperate, frozen, hungry time of the year.
The shepherds and the dogs keep watch, but they're always casualties.
Exactly, and this is exactly what the political predators of the Angevin Empire are doing as King John's reign falters. The strong devour the weak when the winter of war sets in.
So Hugh is about 21 years old here. He's a young lord in his prime, and he's been managing these harsh Yorkshire estates for 5 years.
Really hardening himself, preparing to eventually inherit the massive earldom of Norfolk.
He rides his prized silver mare, a remarkably fast horse named Arrowback, to the manor house to escape the biting wind. And waiting for him by the fire is his father, Roger Bigod.
Roger Bigod is described in the text as a man as hard and sturdy as a pollarded tree.
Which is such a great visual.
It is. He is one of the most astute legal minds and counselors in the kingdom. He doesn't suffer fools, and he certainly doesn't waste time on sentimentality.
After a pretty meager Lenten supper of fish stew and bread, he clears his younger sons from the room and just delivers the strategic update to Hugh.
He just lays it out. William Marshal has approached me and offered his eldest daughter Mahelt in marriage to you.
And Hugh's stomach immediately sinks. He knows intellectually that it's an amazing alliance, but his very first vocalized thought is, she is not yet 11 years old.
It's a completely fair reaction.
Right. He remembers dancing with her at Christmas, just as she remembered him. He remembers her being tall and lean as a gazehound, but the text explicitly states he viewed her as a boisterous child, not a wife to wed in bed.
And honestly, the text admits he was far more attracted to her mother, Countess Isabel.
Yes. Isabel is a strong, alluring woman in her early 30s. If we look at Hugh's perspective, he's a grown man who wants a partner, not a ward.
Totally understandable.
So how does Roger Bigod, this incredibly calculating patriarch, strip away his son's entirely valid personal objections?
Well, Roger Bigod operates purely on feudal mathematics. He strips all romance and individual desire from the equation entirely.
He doesn't even entertain it.
No. He points out his own age difference with Hugh's mother, actually. And he notes that William Marshal was almost twice Isabel's age when they wed, and they had a spectacularly successful marriage.
Roger basically says, what matters is the honor and prestige of a tie with the Marshals and the affinity the girl will bring.
And affinity, in this context, is the invisible web of medieval power. It means military alliances, shared intelligence, political leverage at court, and social prestige.
Hugh tries to push back logically, though. He uses the brutal mortality rates of the era as his argument. He asks, what if she dies before she reaches womanhood?
Which was a very real possibility back then.
Exactly. Her dowry would be lost, the alliance would crumble, and Hugh's other marriage opportunities would have completely passed them by. It's a massive sunk cost to tie your heir to a prepubescent girl.
It is a huge risk.
Before we hear Roger's response, I really want to emphasize the scale of what is at stake here. The text mentions that the earldom of Norfolk comes with over 160 knights' fees.
That is a staggering amount of wealth.
Right, but for a listener trying to picture the scale of this wealth, what does one knight's fee actually represent in terms of land or power? We're talking about like 160 guys in armor just standing around in a courtyard.
Not exactly, though it does translate to that military force eventually. A knight's fee is a phenomenal economic engine. The sources detail that a single knight's fee is a unit of land, often an entire manor, complete with farmlands, mills, and peasant labor.
So it's a whole community.
Yes. And it's capable of generating enough agricultural surplus to fully support a heavily armed cavalryman, his war horses, his squires, and his incredibly expensive equipment.
Wow.
So when the text says Roger Bigod holds 160 fees, it means he commands the economic output of massive swaths of the English countryside. If the king calls his banners, Bigod can field a private army.
Or he can just buy his way out of it.
Exactly. More commonly, by 1204, he can pay scutage, which is shield money, in lieu of providing those knights. That pours staggering amounts of silver directly into the royal treasury.
That economic and military weight makes him indispensable, and it makes Hugh one of the most eligible bachelors in all of Europe.
Which makes Roger Bigod's counter-argument to Hugh's fears about Mahelt's potential mortality even more shockingly clinical.
Oh, it's so cold.
Roger doesn't reassure his son with, like, fatherly platitudes. He points out that the Marshal children are not sickly. He says they are as robust as Distrades, war horses.
He literally looks at his son, the heir to these 160 knights' fees, with a gleam in his eye, and calls a 10-year-old girl good breeding stock.
It's a completely transactional view of human life.
It makes Hugh just exhale with sardonic amusement. You can really feel his resignation in the text.
He bows to his father's will. He says, I know my duty to the family and my concerns are not objections.
He recognizes that he is just as much a piece of political capital as Mahelt is. He is the vessel through which the Bigod legacy must continue, and his personal preferences are utterly irrelevant.
And if we connect this to the bigger picture, Roger Bigod's cold calculation is entirely driven by the existential threat looming across the channel.
Things are getting really bad in France.
Very bad. When Hugh asks for news from Normandy, Roger paints a terrifying picture. King Philip of France is making deep surgical inroads into Angevin territory.
The great castle at Chateau Gaillard is holding out, but there are absolutely no English gains being made to relieve it.
And Queen Eleanor of Aquitaine, the indomitable matriarch of the empire, she is 80 years old and actively dying at Fonterrade.
Roger knows that once she is gone, all of Poitou and Aquitaine will just explode into rebellion.
And Roger pinpoints the exact mechanical failure of King John's reign. He tells Hugh that King John will lose all the small men.
The small men being the local Norman vassals, right?
Exactly. The local lords and castellans who actually hold the terrain. Why would they stay loyal to an English king who has fled across the sea and cannot protect their farmlands from the French army?
I mean, feudalism is essentially a protection racket. If the king cannot provide protection, the vassals will flip their loyalty to the French king just to keep their ancestral lands.
That's it exactly. As Roger astutely points out, it is the small men who uphold the great.
Because of this impending structural collapse, Roger makes a highly strategic, totally unsentimental business decision. He knows his own Norman lands, places like Corban and Montfiquet, might be completely lost.
So he orders Hugh to prepare to cross the channel as soon as the weather improves and execute a massive extraction operation.
They are going to evacuate their highly valuable stud of breeding horses back to England. They are absolutely not going to leave their superior horseflesh as a parting gift for the King of France.
Which serves as the perfect transition to the subject of horses, honestly, and to the emotional and psychological climax of the source material.
Yes, the violent breakdown of trust that occurs next proves exactly why these families are so desperate to secure ironclad alliances in the first place.
We are moving from the icy, isolated fields of Yorkshire directly into the toxic epicenter of the realm.
The royal court of King John, which is currently residing at the castle in York.
Here's where it gets really interesting, because we have to talk about the deeply tangled, highly dysfunctional web of the royal family tree that the sources provide.
Yes. Before we get into the action at York, I need to break this genealogy down because it dictates literally every single interaction in this chapter.
It's a complicated web.
It is. So, we are introduced to William Longspy, the Earl of Salisbury. William Longspy is the illegitimate son of the late King Henry II and a noblewoman named Ida de Tosny.
King Henry took Ida as his mistress when she was 15.
Right. And after she gave birth to Longspy, the king forced her to part from the infant. So Longspy was raised in the royal household, acknowledged as the king's son, but forever carrying the stain of bastardy.
Now here's the twist. Ida de Tosny eventually married Roger Bigod.
Yes, she is Hugh Bigod's mother. Therefore, William Longspy is the half-brother of King John on his father's side, and he is the half-brother of Hugh Bigod on his mother's side.
It's an absolute psychological pressure cooker. Longspy is a man constantly at war with his own identity and his place in the feudal hierarchy.
As the text explicitly notes, but for the stain of bastardy, he would be a royal prince.
Exactly. He envies his legitimate Bigod half-brothers. He covets their secure inheritance, their untainted status, their vast wealth.
But simultaneously, because he was raised in the royal household with kings and queens, he looks down upon the Bigods as mere provincial nobility.
And King John, who is an absolute master manipulator, knows exactly how to weaponize this deep-seated insecurity.
He's so cruel about it. We get this incredible scene of a late-night dice game between the king and Longspy in John's private apartments.
They are drinking rich, ruby Gascon wine. John is winning all the silver on the table, naturally.
Naturally. And John is holding a book. Not just any book, a copy of Aesop's Fables with a carved ivory cover and pages illuminated with crushed lapis lazuli and gold.
The text reveals this book was a gift given to the king by Roger Bigod to grease the wheels and gain royal approval for Hugh and Mahelt's betrothal.
John uses the book as a physical prop to inflict psychological warfare. He rubs his thumb over the expensive ivory and casually marvels at how much it must have cost the Earl of Norfolk.
He notes, with heavy irony, how his magnates constantly complain to him of their poverty, claiming they can't afford his taxes.
But they can easily afford such exorbitant luxuries. He looks at Longspy and asks if he knows how much silver the Earl of Norfolk actually has hoarded in his coffers.
Longspy tries to deflect. He plays the diplomat, saying the Earl keeps his coffers to himself and a guest doesn't ask such rude questions.
But John leans in with this silky, predatory cruelty and says, "But you are more than a guest. You are family too."
He deliberately rubs salt in the wound of Longspy's exclusion from the big-had wealth.
John mocks him, pointing out that he, the king, always has to lend Longspy money so he can win it back at the dice table. He asks if the Earl of Norfolk ever bails Longspy out when he visits his mother.
It's a brutal, calculated dismantling of a man's pride.
It really is. This is the defining characteristic of John's governance as portrayed in these sources. He doesn't just want obedience, he wants to humiliate and totally dominate his dependents.
He uses factionalism and paranoia to keep his court off balance constantly.
Right. And then John pivots from the Bigod wealth to the upcoming Marshal-Bigod marriage. He sneers at Bigod's eye for profit, always done to the letter of the law.
And then, having totally isolated Longsby, he turns his gaze onto Longsby's own marriage. He asks, "Your Ela was 9 years old when you married, wasn't she?"
And John just pushes the knife deeper into the most sensitive part of Longsby's life. He says, "Lush is 16 now. How long did you wait?"
Oh, it's so gross. Longsby's complexion darkens. He hates this line of questioning.
The text tells us Longsby actually adores Ela. He's fiercely protecting of her, and he rarely brings her to court because he knows exactly what a sexual predator John is.
John is intensely jealous of anything that brings joy or security to the people he considers his personal property.
But Longsby just sits there and takes the abuse. He has to. His proximity to the king, his royal half-brother, is the absolute only source of his power and his lands.
That underlying, festering humiliation is the toxic baggage that Longsby carries with him into the castle stable yard the very next morning.
The court is preparing to go hunting. Longsby goes to formally congratulate his half-brother Hugh on the martial betrothal, which is a diplomatic duty he clearly resents.
And there he spots Hugh's prized silver mare, Arrow, arrayed in this magnificent red and gold Bigod harness.
The text specifically tells us Longsby's heart swelled with envy. The Bigods keep the absolute best horse flesh in England, and Hugh, the golden legitimate heir, always gets first pick.
They have this incredibly stiff, awkward conversation about the marriage alliance. And then Longsby starts aggressively examining Arrow.
He checks her legs with knowing hands. He asks if she's fast.
Hugh, with a hint of youthful bravado, says she could beat any courser in the stable over a mile.
I want to pause here on the terminology, actually. The text differentiates between horses. Arrow is a courser, while others ride destriers. What is the mechanical difference here in a medieval context?
It's a critical distinction for the scene. A destrier is a warhorse-heavy, thick-necked, trained to carry a man in full chainmail armor and deliver a massive kinetic impact in a cavalry charge.
So they are powerful but not built for sustained sprinting.
Exactly. A courser, like Arrow, is lighter, leaner, and bred specifically for speed and endurance. They're used for hunting and racing.
So when Hugh claims she is the fastest, he is immensely proud of her specific breeding.
Right. But Longsby immediately points across the yard to a massive black Spanish stallion belonging to the powerful lord of Bramber, William de Braose, and he asks, "You reckon she could beat de Braose's black?"
It's a calculated, petty escalation born entirely of Longsby's bruised ego from the night before.
Longsby's a gambler by nature, and he presses Hugh, asking if it was just an idle boast.
And then Ralph, the younger Bigod brother, who foolishly idolizes Longsby's royal swagger, chimes in, yelling, "Go on, Hugh, do it!"
Under the immense weight of peer pressure, family pride, and just the toxic masculine environment of the royal court, Hugh makes the fatal mistake of handing Arrow's reins over to Longsby.
Longsby immediately wagers 5 marks of silver against de Braose.
5 marks is a substantial sum, representing months of wages for a skilled laborer.
De Braose is amused by the challenge and puts one of his lightweight squires on the black stallion to ensure maximum speed.
And then, just as the riders are gathering to head out, King John strolls up.
Of course he does.
He assesses the situation, reads the tension between his half-brother and the Bigod heir, looks at Longsby, and hands him his own royal whip.
A whip made of heavily plated black leather.
Yes.
The dialogue right here is chilling. Hugh immediately panics. He knows his horse. He tells the king, "Sire, I never whip my horses, and neither does my father."
John looks at him with absolute sociopathic contempt and delivers a line that basically sums up his entire theory of governance.
He says horses, dogs, women, and bishops all benefit from the lash to quicken their paces from time to time, and he tells Longsby to make the mare fly.
The race that follows is heart-pounding and ultimately a tragedy that functions as a dark microcosm for the entire realm.
They set up a 4-furlong course about half a mile out and half a mile back out beyond Micklegate Bar, using a wooden post in the sand as the turning point.
A crowd of courtiers gathers. A herald blows a horn, and they are off. Arrow, this beautiful, lightweight silver cloud, immediately surges to the front.
But Hugh, watching from the starting line, realizes with mounting horror that Longsby is riding her entirely wrong.
He's not pacing her at all. He's burning all her anaerobic energy on the outward stretch.
Because Longsby doesn't care about the horse. He only cares about winning back the pride John stripped from him the night before.
Exactly. As they round the wooden post and head back toward the crowd, the heavier, stronger horses de Browse's black stallion and the Archbishop of York's bay begin closing the gap.
Arrow is straining massively. Her ears are pinned back flat against her skull. The other horses are right on her flanks, breathing down her neck.
And in the final stretch, desperate to secure the victory and prove his worth to the king, Longsby raises John's black leather whip.
He brings it down once, twice, violently. Arrow flattens herself to the ground in a final, agonizing burst of speed. She crosses the sand line ahead and shoulders in front.
But the physiological cost is absolute. She has been pushed beyond the physical limits of her heart and lungs.
She stumbles. She kitches violently forward, mane over tail. Longsby manages to roll clear of the crushing weight, but Arrow stays down.
Hugh runs out onto the course, screaming in denial. The description provided in the text is heartbreaking and incredibly graphic.
Scarlet blood is streaming from her nostrils, indicating a massive internal rupture. Her legs are shuddering in death throes.
Her blood flows hot over Hugh's knees as he drops to the sand, cradles her heavy head, and rubs the white star on her forehead, and she dies right there, surrounded by the laughing court.
It's awful, and the aftermath is a masterclass in contrasting values and the total lack of empathy at John's court. William de Brose strides over, looks down at the dead silver mare with the curling lip, and shoves the winnings, a heavy leather pouch of silver, into Longsby's hand.
He sneers, "No good having a fast horse if it's going to drop dead under you." He just turns and walks away.
Longsby, who is shaken but instantly defensive, tries to deflect blame. He tells Hugh, "She died because she wasn't sound, not because I struck her."
Hugh completely loses his aristocratic composure. He launches himself at Longsby, seizing his own half-brother by the throat, sobbing, "You rode her to death. Her blood is on your hands."
Roger Bigod, who has been watching this entire disaster unfold, has to physically step in and drag his son off the king's brother.
Longsby, trying to save face in front of the court and alleviate his guilt, offers to buy Hugh another courser to recompense him.
And Hugh's response is a vow that fractures their family completely. He bares his teeth and says, "I want none of you. I would not take silver from your hand, even if I were starving and destitute. That horse was worth more to me than money." But you wouldn't understand that.
It is a profound, irreparable rupture.
It really is. And how does the king react to this family destroying itself for his amusement? John returns, calmly retrieves his black leather whip from the sand, and offers entirely empty condolences to Roger Bigod,
advising him sourly to look to your bloodlines if his horses are dropping dead.
So dismissive. When the king and Longsby finally ride off for the hunt, Hugh looks at the bag of 5 marks his father pragmatically accepted from the wager. Hugh calls it blood money.
He vows unto the grave never to lend or give William Longsby anything ever again.
I think we have to look at this horse race as a perfect, horrifying analogy for King John's approach to his empire.
Oh, absolutely. Arrow is the realm itself. Everyone, from the magnates to the small men, from the church to the peasantry, is pushed past their breaking point.
Whipped into submission for the king's paranoia and the vanity of his favorites.
Forced to run until their structural integrity literally explodes and they collapse in the sand. And the king just picks up his whip and walks away, blaming the victim for being weak.
That is exactly it. And the trauma of that morning at York doesn't just stay in York. It ripples outward, polluting the very alliances that are supposed to secure the future against John's tyranny.
A signed contract doesn't erase the trauma these men carry home.
No, it doesn't. And we see that emotional bleed over immediately as we transition to our next source chapter. We are heading back south to Caversham.
It is March 1204, just a month after the death of Arrow. The stage is set for the official betrothal ceremony between 10-year-old Mahelt Marshal and 21-year-old Hugh Bigod.
They are in the private chapel at Caversham. Hugh slips a ring of plated gold onto Mahelt's heart finger, officially sealing the political alliance William Marshal and Roger Bigod negotiated.
But the vibe is entirely different from the warm, festive Christmas court where Mahelt first developed her crush on him.
It's so awkward now. He was deadly serious, weighed down by the impending war and his lingering grief and anger from York. The light exuberance she remembers is totally gone.
Mahelt is incredibly anxious, trying to treat the religious ceremony like a complex progression of dance steps she just has to memorize so she doesn't embarrass her family.
And at the feast afterward in the Great Hall, the awkwardness between the new couple is just palpable. Hugh is polite, courtly, offering her the choicest morsels of young duck and cardamom-perfumed barley.
He tries to make conversation, telling her that when they are eventually married, she comes to Norfolk, he will take her riding.
Mahelt, eager to connect over a shared interest, mentions her new palfrey, a horse named Amber. Before we go on, what exactly is a palfrey compared to the courser we just saw die?
Oh, a palfrey is a highly valued, expensive riding horse known for having an ambling gait rather than a bouncy trot.
So it's a smoother ride.
Yes, they provide a very smooth, comfortable ride, making them the ideal mount for noblewomen traveling long distances across uneven medieval roads. They are status symbols, but they aren't meant for racing or war.
Got it. So Mahelt is proudly talking about her new palfrey, and then completely innocently she asks him, "Do you still have that white mare I saw you riding at Christmas?"
Oh, it makes you wince just reading the text.
It really does. She has absolutely no idea what she just asked. She has no idea about Longsby or the whip or the blood in the sand.
The text says Hugh's eyelids instantly tighten. A dark, closed look returns to his face. He completely shuts down emotionally.
He simply says, "No, I don't. But I'm going to Normandy soon to bring our stud herd to England, and I'll choose a new horse then."
Mahelt is a smart kid. She senses immediately that she's stepped on a massive landmine and drops the subject.
She just swings her legs under the table, wanting to run away and burn off her anxious tension. The unhealed trauma of York is already seeping into the foundations of this fragile new betrothal.
This is where the text provides a profound glimpse into the incredible emotional labor required of noble women in this era.
Right, while the men go off to the yard to aggressively test some new sword blades, a very stark reminder of the violence they're preparing for, the women are left in the hall to talk.
Mahelt's cousin, Ela William Longsby's 16-year-old wife, is there.
Ela admires the new gold ring and tries to reassure Mahelt, praising Hugh's mother, Countess Ida, and assuring Mahelt that despite his current dark mood, Hugh is a genuinely handsome and kind man.
But Ela also hints in the dark political undercurrents that are making everyone so tense. She sighs and says she wishes her husband, Will Longsby, and Hugh were fonder of each other.
Mahelt, ever curious and not yet understanding the blood feud that just started, asks why they aren't.
And Ela explains the totally impossible, contradictory situation her husband is trapped in. She says Longsby has a foot in two worlds.
The king expects Longsby to spy on his Bigod family and ensure their loyalty, and the Bigods look to Longsby to ease their path with the volatile king.
Balancing his personal honor, his royal blood, and his feudal duty is nearly impossible.
And then Ela delivers a line that perfectly defines the female experience of the nobility. She says, "It is the place of a wife to be a peace weaver. I do my best, but Will is proud and stubborn, and Hugh hides behind a smile he doesn't always mean."
The concept of the peace weaver is ancient, stretching back to Anglo-Saxon traditions.
He's such a heavy burden.
It really is. These noble women weren't merely passive breeding stock, despite Roger Bigod's crude clinical terminology. They were the active, diplomatic glue of the realm.
They were tasked with holding volatile, deeply flawed men and warring political factions together through their own emotional intelligence, influence, and constant mediation.
But looking at the sheer scale of the egos and the violence involved, this raises a really important question.
Yeah, I look at Ela trying to manage a husband who just whipped a horse to death to soothe his own ego, and I wonder how long can a peace weaver realistically hold the fabric of a family or a kingdom together when the men are so utterly determined to tear it apart with their pride, their petty wagers, and their endless wars.
Not long at all, as the text immediately and violently demonstrates.
Just as the women are having this quiet, intimate conversation about the exhausting nature of diplomacy and emotional management, the macro world physically crashes the party.
A messenger arrives at a dead gallop in the courtyard.
He dismounts a lathered horse and hurries straight past the guards to William Marshal.
The swordplay in the yard stops instantly. Everyone gathers around.
Mahelt runs over to her brother Will, demanding to know what happened. Will pushes his hair off his sweaty forehead and drops the geopolitical bombshell they have all been dreading.
He says, "The castle at Gaillard has fallen."
Chateau Gaillard, the great fortress built by Richard the Lionheart specifically to guard the river approach to Rouen, has been taken by the French.
King John failed to break the siege. And looking at the geographical maps provided in our source stack, this isn't just a border fort changing hands, it's the linchpin of the entire defense.
Gaillard is positioned on a high chalk bend of the River Seine. It is the physical lock on the waterway to Rouen, the capital and economic heart of Normandy.
King Philip of France couldn't march on Rouen with Gaillard at his back. It would completely sever his supply lines. But once Gaillard fell, the Seine was wide open.
Rouen is now completely exposed. King John has effectively, disastrously lost Normandy.
It is an earthquake that shakes the foundation of every family in the realm.
Mahelt asks if their father will lose his vast lands in Normandy, and Will shrugs and says, not if he can help it, but it's bad.
This single piece of news instantly changes the trajectory of every character we've been following. The theoretical war is now a material reality.
Which logically forces us to look at how these families execute their contingency plans. We transition across the English Channel to Normandy itself.
It is May 1204, a few months after the fall of Gaillard. We find Hugh Bigod at the Bigod Manor of Montfichet.
He's executing his father's strategic orders to evacuate the precious horse stud before the French army arrives to requisition everything.
But before we see the grand strategic retreat, the text gives us a deeply personal, surprisingly intimate scene. Hugh is waking up at dawn, listening to the birdsong in the orchards, lying in bed next to a woman named Nicolette.
Nicolette is a local Norman woman with cherry red hair. The text is very clear that her relationship with Hugh is transactional. She is a sex worker, and Hugh is a paying client, as is a local bishop and a wealthy wine merchant in the town.
But despite the financial nature of the arrangement, there is a genuine, profound affection and mutual respect between them.
They both know exactly what today is. It's the end. When Hugh leaves today to catch the tide, he is never coming back. The French will take the land, the borders will close, and this chapter of his life is over.
He gives her a silk-corded belt purse, heavy with silver, explicitly stating it is not a fee, but a parting gift to help her survive the coming occupation.
She touches his face and tells him, what is tender to the touch now will become nostalgia.
It is a beautifully written, melancholic farewell. But from an analytical standpoint, the contrast the author is drawing is stark.
We just witnessed Hugh's incredibly stiff, politically mandated, emotionally closed-off betrothal to a 10-year-old girl he views as a burden.
Right. And here, with Nicolette, he has an authentic, warm, adult connection. But the mechanics of his feudal reality dictate that he must leave the authentic connection behind.
To return to a child bride he barely knows, bound entirely by duty and the preservation of those 160 knights' fees.
He helps Nicolette onto her horse, watches her ride away into the dawn mist, and then immediately compartmentalizes his emotions to focus on the evacuation.
The evacuation is a massive, complex logistical undertaking. Hugh, along with his younger brothers William and Ralph and an army of grooms, is herding dozens of highly strung, incredibly valuable horses toward the coast.
This includes a magnificent 4-year-old black Spanish stallion named Hibon that Hugh has claimed as his new personal mount to replace Arrow.
It is early in the season, the verges are green, and Hugh is riding over his boyhood haunts. He's looking at the hills and streams, knowing the French are going to come, seize the land, breed their own horses in these pastures, and make their own cider from the apple orchards.
It's a huge loss for the family.
It is, but I want to push back on this Bigod strategy for a second, or at least theorize on it. The Bigods are one of the most powerful military families in the empire, and they are just abandoning their ancestral lands without a single sword swung.
They are.
To use a modern equivalent, it sounds exactly like a massive corporation looking at a failing overseas market, deciding the political climate is unrecoverable, and just executing a ruthless divestment, repatriating their core assets and cutting their losses to protect the bottom line. Is that truly how cold the feudal calculus had become under King John?
Absolutely. It is a harsh, unsentimental feudal reality, and it is perfectly articulated in the text by Hugh's younger brother, William.
What does William say?
As they are herding the horses, William asks Hugh why their father didn't just leave one of them behind in Normandy to swear an oath of fealty to the French King Philip, thereby keeping the estates in the Bigod family name.
Ah, hedging their bets. That makes sense.
It was a common tactic for families with cross-channel holdings to split their loyalty. But Hugh explains that their father, Roger, is far too shrewd to put his sons out on a limb like that.
Right, because if King John found out, he would destroy them in England.
Exactly. The Norman lands, while pleasant and nostalgic, are a mere spit in the ocean compared to their vast English estates and revenues. Roger Bigod refuses to go down on a sinking ship for the sake of pride or nostalgia.
Consolidating their defensible power, their wealth, and their physical assets in England is the absolute only logical move when the king has failed his primary duty of protection.
But as they are riding toward the ships, William drops a massive, terrifying piece of gossip he picked up from a traveling jongleur at breakfast.
He tells Hugh that William Marshal Mahelt's father, the man Hugh is now inextricably allied with, is allegedly negotiating directly with the French king to try and save his own massive Norman lands.
This isn't just hedging bets, this is radioactive.
If King John finds out his greatest knight is making a side deal with the enemy, the wrath will be unimaginable. William Bigod is terrified that because Hugh is now betrothed to Mahelt, the Bigods will be dragged down in the fallout of a treason charge.
And treason under King John usually meant your family was starved to death in a dungeon or stripped of every acre they own.
But Hugh, showing the political instincts he inherited from his father, brushes the panic off. He trusts in his father's shrewdness to protect the Bigod core.
And he trusts implicitly in William Marshal's legendary, almost supernatural survival instincts. He knows Marshal is playing an incredibly dangerous high-wire game with two kings, but he believes Marshal has the political capital and the sheer audacity to pull it off.
It perfectly encapsulates the knife edge these noble families are walking every single day. Every marriage alliance is a risk. Every strategic retreat is a gamble, and every whispered rumor could be a literal death sentence.
It's an incredibly stressful way to live.
So what does this all mean for us? Looking back at these sources from the 21st century, we've covered an incredible amount of ground today on this deep dive.
I really am.
We've watched a 10-year-old girl pulled from a muddy courtyard and transformed into a geopolitical shield. We've witnessed the toxic, authoritarian sadism of a failing king that resulted in the literal bloody death of a magnificent silver mare over a petty wager.
And we've seen the absolute cold-blooded pragmatism required to cut your losses, evacuate your assets, and survive the total structural collapse of an empire.
It is a world where human emotion is constantly, violently subjugated to the demands of power, property, and survival.
Yet, ironically, those raw emotions, the pride, the envy, the love, the deep-seated grief, are exactly the mechanisms that drive the actions that alter history. You cannot separate the politics from the psychology of the people forced to enact them.
Exactly. And while you listening hopefully aren't planning on marrying off your 10-year-old to secure property rights, the structural themes here are astonishingly timeless.
They really are. We all struggle with balancing family duty versus personal autonomy.
We see the horrific damage caused by authoritarian structures that rely on paranoia, humiliation, and factionalism to maintain control, much like King John's court.
And knowing when to strategically retreat, when to look at a failing system and divest your energy to protect what really matters, is a critical survival skill in any era.
I want to leave you with a final, slightly provocative thought to mull over as you go about your day. In this deep dive, we watch the Bigods execute a massive, highly coordinated logistical operation across the English Channel to move their most prized possessions, their horses, out of the line of fire and into absolute safety when the threat of war became real.
They spared no expense to save those horses.
But at the exact same time, in the exact same political climate, they deliberately tethered their own children to the absolute center of the political battlefield through betrothals and marriages, using them as living barricades against the king.
It's a haunting parallel.
It makes you wonder, in the brutal, unforgiving calculus of medieval history, were the horses actually treated with more care and protection than the heirs? Think about that. Until next time, keep diving deep.